Hi, and welcome to the Politics of Justice. It's me, Amy Austin. This is just an off the cuff recording because all day today I've been doom scrolling. Not all day, but part of the day because I have a little bit of jet lag or a lot of jet lag, which doesn't allow me to do a lot. But I've been doom scrolling. And when I'm doom scrolling, all the stories are about the recent death of a woman named Renee Nicole Good, who was shot at point blank range 3 times by ICE in the US, in Minnesota, where they're currently doing their operations or whatever. So I think the thing that I'm really surprised about is the number of, we don't call them bloggers anymore, the number of social media people who seem surprised at the idea that law enforcement can shoot people if they believe that they have a fear for their life. And I'm thinking, wait, what? So in 1985, so 40 years ago, I mean, you were in 2026, but generally 40 years ago, the Supreme Court had a case, the state of Tennessee versus Garner, which stands for the proposition that law enforcement can use deadly force if they reasonably fear for their life. Now, do I think that law enforcement reasonably fear for their life? Not so much. But in many of the cases where law enforcement shoots and kills unarmed Black people, the first thing they say is fear for their life. And there's another case that came afterwards, Graham versus Connor, which was 80, I'm so sorry, this is not yesterday, 1989, that sort of set a standard for what can determine fear for your life. But these cases, and probably others that I don't know about, sort of open the floodgates for the idea that if a cop says, I reasonably feared for my life, I reasonably feared for my safety, then the shooting was justified. This is the standard. This has been the standard for 40 years. Do I think the standard is fair? No. Are we familiar with police using the specter of Black people um, as like being afraid of them as a way to justify killing? Yes. Do people run around to the US fearing Black people? Yes. And yet, here we are, and people seem surprised that this is a reasonable excuse when it's clear from the videos, well, maybe not clear, let's say that. It is, it appears from the videos that there was really no fear, and this is just like shooting somebody at point blank range when they're fleeing. And there's a lot about fleeing people and the idea of flight being like a justification for police action. I mean, there's like a whole host of laws about this. But you know what all the laws do? They favor law enforcement. They have favored law enforcement for at least 40 years, and we're just like stacked on and on and on with this concept. And yet, and yet people seem surprised. And I'm actually pretty speechless that this has been the standard, this is the known standard, and yet people seem surprised. I don't know if they're surprised because the victim is white. I don't know if they're surprised because the victim is a woman. I don't know what the surprise and shock is, but this is the standard. And if the standard was okay for the last 40 years, I don't know why the standard's not okay now. I am not saying the standard is okay. I have always thought the standard was biased. I think there's so many cases where, oh my God, I'm thinking about the Cleveland one with the kid in the park and the fake gun. I can't think of his name right now. Who, actually, I'm going to pause and look it up. His name is Tamir Rice. I did look it up because I do write about Cleveland, and so clearly I should probably talk about that. But there, 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 there are an endless number of cases. So I was actually thinking about this because I wrote a book called Unarmed, which is behind me, and I just looked at the publication date. The book came out in 2016, and it's the book where I took on the reasonable fear, the Garner idea that no matter what somebody's doing, they can be shot by police. In Unarmed, the victim is a chef. So he's carrying chef's knives, and I don't know, I've known a few chefs, and they have these like they take their knives home because knives are expensive and people are very particular about it. And so they have like knife rolls and they put them in these, they're usually like black. I don't know if they're like canvas or what they're really made of because I don't really pay that close of attention. But they're putting their little knives and rolls and they carry them, they carry them with them. And so in that book, the police officer, whose name is actually Mark Baldwin, says that he thought that the knives were a gun and that given that reasonable fear for his life or public safety or whatever, he shot the victim, whose name I believe is Troy. I can't think. I have to think of his name. It's a character, but so here we are, 40 years later, and I think it's 100% clear that we live in a nation that is going to use the laws that they've used to oppress some people to oppress more of the people. Will that result in a change? Honestly, I actually just honestly don't know. I always think that if things happen to people who are not black or brown, it would result in a change. I've thought that in my life. I don't know if I believe that anymore. Can't say about that. But I just wanted to pop on and just have a quick moment where we can consider that laws that have been used as tools of repression and as a way to excuse law enforcement from consequences, criminal action, and allow them to do what they want with impunity was eventually going to come around. And this is where we are today. I'm not saying it's good. I feel pretty awful that this is where we are. And we live in a country where some minimally trained people are running around with masks and guns, shooting people and killing them with impunity, capturing people, detaining people, putting people in detention centers where they can't contact their family, and moving them around to in private detention centers. I mean, there's like about 14,000 layers of what's wrong with this situation. But I will only say that this has been the law of the land for 40 years. And if it was a problem then, it's a problem now.